Hello everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. Hey, thanks for watching. In this video I want to take some time to talk about deontological ethics, or sometimes what's called duty-based ethics. So let me see if I can just set the stage a little bit and then move on and say some things about some of the crucial features or perhaps essential features in some cases of thinking about what a duty-based ethics is in the first place. So remember, deontological ethics and duty-based ethics, they're used sometimes interchangeably with each other, and so I will feel free to do so in this video as well. Okay, so a deontological ethics, just some stage setting stuff, is distinct from a consequentialist ethics. So I invite you to watch my video on consequentialist ethics. In that video, I tried to capture what a consequentialist ethics was by thinking about how it's a view that says that the rightness of an action is entirely determined by its consequences. So a right action brings about good or the best consequences, and a wrong action is one that doesn't bring about good or the best consequences. A deontological ethics comes along and rejects that claim. So there's primarily something negative to be said about deontological ethics in this regard. It's non-consequentialist. So according to the deontologist, the idea is that at least some actions that we perform are right independent of consequences. So some right actions are right even if in performing the action we don't bring about good or the best consequences. And we say the same thing about thinking about right actions. Okay? So again, a deontological ethics is negative in this way in response to consequentialism. It's a non-consequentialist view. At least some of our actions, in fact, perhaps many of our actions, are right even if they don't bring about, on balance, good or the best consequences. Okay, and there's other ways of going that are sort of more positive in thinking about what a deontological ethics looks like. Some of the things, let's move into that sort of phase to say something positive about a deontological ethics. So one of the things that theorists will point to as deontologists, despite just negatively saying we're not consequentialists, is to say that they think options are significant. So how is this a significant thing to say? Well, options for the deontologist involve thinking about how it is that we can choose to do things even if and thus act correctly, or at least permissibly, even if we're not bringing about that which is the best or that which generally brings about good consequences. So there are options that are available to us independent of our consequences. So many consequentialists, at least traditionally, have held that when we act, we are obligated to bring about the best consequences. This would seem to suggest that there's only one right way to behave. There's only one option to choose, the one that's going to bring about the best consequences. That would seem to limit the options when we act. The deontologist responds by trying to say, excuse me, that surely we can act even in many cases in which we're not doing that which is the best. So there's more than one sort of option open to us. Now, generally, deontologists want to say, yeah, bring about good consequences. That's a fine thing to do. In fact, in many cases, it's the right thing to do. But the main difference between the deontologist and the consequentialist on this score is that the deontologist is saying that there's no necessary connection between the two. And when we think about the options, maybe the best way of thinking about it is that, again, the consequentialist, in some of its guises, maintain that we always have to do that which is the best, which means that there's no such thing as acting heroically, okay? Because when you act heroically, you have to, when you act heroically, you're acting in such a way that you go above and beyond what right action would require of you, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. The deontologist wants to say that we don't always have to act as if we're heroes. Presumably heroes are the ones that act the best or act close to the best. The deontologist is saying, no, all that right action requires of us is that we do our duty, and it doesn't require of us that we go above and beyond our duty. Again, the consequentialist, in some of its guises, right, wants to say that since we have to do the best, there's no such thing really as the heroic. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. So that's sometimes claimed to be one of the crucial ways in which deontology expresses itself as a normative ethical theory in distinction from the consequentialist tradition. Okay, another way of thinking about deontology is in terms of what's known as special obligations. So special obligations are to be understood as arising from our special relationships to other people. So deontologists begin in some cases with the intuitive thought that a parent, for example, has special obligations to his or her children. Why? Because parents have special relationships with their children and vice versa. And part of the special relationship might involve something like a dependence relationship. The children depend on their parents, or there are very strong bonds that form between children and their parents and vice versa. And so given this, given the fact that many relationships can be like this, other types of human relationships even perhaps with animals, these special relationships confer on us, require of us, as it were, that we have obligations that we don't have to just strangers or those who we don't have these special relationships with. So that's the significant way of capturing this idea that there are special obligations that the deontologist begins with in many cases in developing their normative ethical theory. They say that any theory that doesn't get this aspect to morality right, moral action right, is just misguided. Now, the consequentialist understands this objection and has responded to it. Typical responses are, well, these special relationships do confer in some cases obligations, perhaps special obligations if you want to call them those, to our loved ones and those with whom we have these special relationships. And the consequentialist wants to say that, look, in these cases, these special obligations are derivative. They're derivative on a very neutral, duty that tells us that we are to promote the good or promote the best. And one of the ways in which we can promote the good or promote the best, it turns out, is to allow people to live up to these special obligations. So enjoy these special relationships and then have the special obligations on the basis of enjoying those special relationships. But the crucial thing here is that the special obligations are all derivative. They're derived from the general normative principle for the consequentialist. So the duty-based theorists, the deontologists again, what they're going to maintain is that these special obligations, in fact, are fundamental because the special relationships we have themselves are fundamental. So that's a crucial difference between the deontologist and the consequentialist on this issue. The consequentialist will maintain that the special obligations are derivative, whereas the deontologist says, not so much. They actually are fundamental. So that there is something positive that a deontologist can say in working out a deontological theory in response to the consequentialist without just saying that we're not consequentialists. So far we've seen the options view. We think that we have options available to us that don't involve doing the best, or in many cases doing quite a bit of good. We just have to do enough good, of course. And in some cases, there's an independent connection. We don't have to do that which brings about good because doing that which is right doesn't involve, always in every case, bringing about good consequences. And then the second idea was the idea of special obligations. Now, of course, a deontologist could, if he or she wanted, accept both these first two ideas and say, these are essential features of my particular version of deontology. Okay? Or they could choose one of the two. Or neither, because there's a third option, which is called constraints. The deontologists, in some cases, want to say that there are significant constraints. We see this at the end of my consequentialism video, for those of you who've seen that. There are certain constraints on our actions, our moral actions, that the consequentialists can't properly respect, that the deontologist says are absolutely fundamental to the moral life and acting morally. So what's had in mind here? Well, the deontologist wants to say that there are certain ways that we just can't behave towards others. There are degrees of strength when we say that that there are certain things that we can't do with respect to treatment of others. Some say that it's absolute, or that there's some absolute constraints with respect to our dealings with others, and others say that no, they're not quite absolute, but they are really, really firm, and only extremely rare cases would be okay to cross the relevant boundaries here. Okay, that's all really abstract. Let me see if I can give an example. I'll use the same one that I used at the end of the consequentialism video. So suppose we imagine torture as the relevant action. The deontologist tends to be pretty firmly opposed to torture, at least in most cases. And there are some deontologists who want to say there's an absolute prohibition against torture. It is an absolute constraint. You can't torture, say, a human being, and perhaps any other being for that matter. While others who are deontologists want to say, no, it's just about every possible case. But there are some very extremely rare cases in which it would be permissible to do so. But no matter, both such deontologists are in a position where they're probably stronger. In the case of the absolute deontologists, of course, they are. They definitely are saying something stronger than what the consequentialist can say. The consequentialist has to say that you're acting correctly in torturing someone if doing so brings about the best consequences. And so there might be plenty of possible cases in which it's going to be permissible to inflict torture on someone. The duty-based theorist, deontologist, the absolutist says it's never okay. There's never even a possible case in which it's okay. And then there are going to be some who are going to say that in some very rare possible cases would it be okay. Okay, so this is an idea of constraints. The deontologist says these constraints are fundamental. The consequentialists say that they're derived from thinking about these good consequences, and that's a crucial difference between the two. Now, someone could hold then the options aspect of deontology, or they could hold the special obligations aspect or the constraints aspect. In order to be a deontologist, pick one of the three, two of the three, or perhaps all three of them, and use them to develop your deontology. You're going to find different flavors of deontology out there, just like you would find different flavors of consequentialism out there. There are different versions of deontology. I'm going to refer you to my videos on Immanuel Kant, so those capture his ethical view, and then also refer you to videos by W.D. Ross, who challenges both a Kantian ethical theory, which is deontological, and consequentialism, to develop an interesting kind of deontological ethics. So we have the deontological position. It's non-consequentialist, and there's different ways in which these non-consequentialist deontologists develop their deontology. Okay, either in terms of options, special obligations, or constraints. Some mix of the three, or all three, indeed, are ways of developing such a theory. Okay, so I hope that we understand deontology better as an ethical theory. If you have any questions, please comment below in the comment section on my YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please contact me at jedickin@syr.edu. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.